What up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Nerd Cosa Nostra, and this is Reign of Horror. Happy Saturday. I hope everyone's had a great Saturday thus far and having a good evening. Things have been good here. Things are all good, better than I deserve. Not a lot going out there in the horror world today, at least not since last night. It's been pretty quiet, but did come across a few things this morning that I thought were worth mentioning. You know, got a couple updates on a couple films that are going to be coming up in the works. Found some interesting tidbits about American Horror Story. If you have never seen that show, definitely a show worth checking out. You can find it over on Hulu. There's at least they have at least 12 seasons out there. There's 12 seasons overall, but I believe Hulu has all 12 seasons of the original show plus the spin-off American Horror Stories. Last night, if you happen to have checked out the show from last night, we did cover, one of our topics was around horror movies that are based on true stories. One of those was, as we were going through them and checking out to see how the author ranked them, we kind of shuffled some things around based on, our rankings and where we felt as far as, really more so on the movie aspect, obviously, where the movies ranked as far as how good the movies were and whatnot. So one of those movies that we did cover was The Strangers, the original film. Not the sequel and not the recent prequels that have been coming out this year. So far, we've gotten Chapter 1 this year. We were supposed to get Chapters 2 and 3 also this year, but it looks like that may not happen, at least not both of them. So, again, not based on those. It was strictly based off the original film. So came across an article that goes further in depth into the true story, or the true stories, I should say, that the original film was based on. So we'll just briefly look at that. And, typically, like I like to do in wrapping up the show is, one of those like top 10, top 14, 15 type lists. So I did come across one around zombie films I thought was pretty interesting and worth kind of running through to see, hey, when it comes to zombie films, how do we feel? Do we agree with this list, not agree with this list? Do we need to shuffle some things around based on our taste? Again, I know all these lists are subjective, but I always find them kind of fun to go through and see how other people rank certain films based on their taste, and if we would agree or make any adjustments to them. So with that said, it's gonna but beyond that, it's gonna be a pretty short show tonight. Again, it being a Saturday, kind of wanted to have a really short, relaxed show. So again, not much. We're not going to get into too much crazy stuff tonight, but again, some things I thought were at least worth bringing up and sharing with everybody. So, all right, so let's jump right into our first topic, which is Irish vampire movie feed pits social media influencers up against vampires. So, again, if you happen to have checked, I believe it was either last night's show or the night before that. We covered off on a film that's coming out and being produced by the producers that did Smile and Smile 2. They're coming out with a film called Monitor, which follows social media moderators, where they have this evil entity or demon that's following them, trying to attack them, trying to get to them through their monitors, obviously hence the name Monitor, and how we have this film, using something very similar, as you can see here. If we just jump to the quote here, the film follows a group of 20-something social media influencers who spend a weekend at a remote contemporary house in an Irish forest and must fight for their lives when they awaken the world's original vampire from her slumber. And this is going to be based on an Irish mythology, and also based on Bram Stoker's Dracula as well. So, is this the new trend? Is this what we're going to start seeing now? Don't get me wrong. I know social media obviously is a big thing. We all use it in some capacity. However, are we going to now start seeing the film industry moving more towards this aspect for films, right? Because I think the last thing we all want to see is almost any and every horror movie kind of having that teen horror movie where, again, you're now just following a bunch of social influencers or moderators or what have you until they pretty much somehow, majority of them get retired, or so many of them should have been retired and somehow make it out of the situation alive. And then these films just start to feel real campy. There's no suspense, there's no thrill, there's no eeriness. It's just, again, like they're just pumping out content and calling it horror when it's really not a horror movie. So, again, that's just what I don't want to see. Now, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen with the film we just talked about, Monitor, or with this one, Feed. If they can bring that level to these films and make them feel eerie and not make them feel so campy and like that teen slasher film, then I mean, I'm all for it. Let's get some jump scares. Let's get some of that, tense, eerie music, flowing, and let's see some great retirements of these characters, right? If they can do that and make it successful, then I'm all for it. But I just don't want us falling back into some level of perception when it comes to horror films, and then the genre is trying to fight its way back to some level of respect or some level of recognition that, I feel that this year a lot has been done to kind of change that perception. I think there's been a lot of great horror movies, especially this year. Some of us weren't expecting, and I say weren't expecting as far as how good the films were going to be. And I think there have been some really excellent films. And I would love for the genre to keep that momentum going, right? I don't want us to take a step back. And again, we're trying to fight with studios or fight with, fans or what have you to say, hey, the horror genre isn't this. We no longer have that perception or want that perception, right? So we kind of want to make that turn around the mountain, so to speak. So again, for this one, I'm all for it. It just, as we get more information, I'm hoping that this doesn't go down that teen slasher campiness, right? That we've seen in the past. Again, I want us to, as a genre, to take a turn and bring a little bit something new, fresh, to the genre, which we've started to see this year, and I would like that momentum to keep moving forward. So yeah, we'll follow this one, more to come. All right, so anyone who knows zombie flicks or has seen any zombie flicks knows George Romero is obviously one of the pioneers, one of the OGs when it comes to zombie films. And obviously here, this article talks about, his final zombie film. And obviously George is no longer with us and hasn't been for a minute now. But his widow did give permission for them to move forward with this final film that he had already written up. So we see here it's going to be called Twilight of the Dead. We see it's going to be starring Milla Jovovich to star in Twilight of the Dead, and I believe there was another. Where is it? Betty Gabriel. You may remember her from Get Out. She will be in the film as well. So if we just jump down, I know there was a quote down here. Let's get rid of this ad real quick. I know there was a quote down here, from his wife, Susan. It was a great pleasure to work with my partners at Roundtable to finally get the last of George A. Romero's The Dead canon out to the fans. All these ads here, let's get rid of them. It's what the fans have longed for, and with Brad Anderson at the helm, it will be sensational. I'm a fan of this zombie franchise overall. Now, I don't think every film has been great. Again, I think some of these films were very much of their time. So they definitely, you can tell they would come, some of them kind of feel a little bit, I don't want to say corny, but again, as for zombie films, as for the time that when they were done and George's style, I didn't expect anything more or anything less. Now, with that said, I will point out that my favorite of the ones he's been involved in and done was Dawn of the Dead from 1978. Now, I know a lot of people have their own favorites when it comes to George's work and it comes to zombie flicks. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm well aware there was a Dawn of the Dead remake, and I'm fully aware that many people prefer the remake over the original. I'm not one of those people. I prefer the original. I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoy both for what they are, for when they were made, but I do enjoy the original Dawn of the Dead more because, again, one of the reasons is obviously it takes place in a shopping mall setting, like the remake does. But in the original, there was aspects of the story where they were navigating through the various stores in the mall as the film went on, because that's where they were living. And you saw like that time. You saw as the time was progressing and time was moving on, how they adapted their lives to living there. Now in the remake, that's not at all what happened. They weren't living there for months and months and months on end. It was a very, hey, we're here. It's been a couple days now. We're bouncing. In the original film, they were there for quite some time until others found this shopping mall. Found it was pretty much open. Open meaning no one was. They didn't know anyone was there until they did. So. And then another reason I like it is because the shopping mall that is projected in the original film is the type of shopping mall that I grew up as a kid going to. That's what shopping malls look like. That's the type of stores that were there. And again, if you grew up around this same time period, you would remember shopping malls like this as well. And as the decades have gone on, either shopping malls no longer look like this, or shopping malls have disappeared altogether. I know many in my city have either completely shut down and have been demolished and replaced with other things, which is very unfortunate to see when you grow up with things like that for 20, 30 years, and then all of a sudden they're just no longer there, right? So again, I'm looking forward to this. Definitely has some star power behind it. Obviously it has some veterans in this zombie horror field, so it's not like this is a new thing for either one of these actresses. So and again, it's the final of George Romero's canon from his canon for this zombie franchise. So glad we're going to be getting it. Glad it has his widow's blessing to do it. So there shouldn't be any issues with the estate putting this out there, right? So definitely looking forward to seeing when this will start to get some dates. We'll start to understand what the story is more about. Obviously, hopefully this will be more of a modern take on it. Again, I'm all for that, as long as it's done right. And I'm sure they'll do it right. I'm sure they'll do George justice as far as it being the final one in his franchise. So we'll definitely be checking this one out. And when it does, we'll bring it back to the channel. We'll bring it back to the table, give our thoughts and opinions on it. And if we can, we'll look to see about even setting up a watch party for George's work. Whether we kind of do one of his films every night. We'll just one film a night. We'll just work our way through them until we get through them all. So I think that would be a pretty fun thing to do. All right, our next topic, moving right along, is American Horror Story's long-awaited Coven, which is return, possesses a big challenge to the show after Apocalypse. So, as I mentioned, if you've never seen this show, which I can't imagine, again, if you're a horror fan, I'd imagine on some level you've seen this show. You may not have liked it. You may have saw a couple episodes or a couple seasons and said, yeah, I'm moving on. That's unfortunate. I'd say go back and give it another try. Go back and try to watch it from the very beginning of the first season, and then try to push your way through all the way to the 12 seasons. Because again, I think like many TV shows, there are going to be some seasons that aren't so great. There are obviously within each season, there are going to be some episodes that aren't so great. But overall, I think this has been a great series. For those of you who may not have seen American Horror Story, each season, while the actors, for example, may jump from season to season, they're playing completely different parts, completely different roles, and the overall story is completely different. So while the first season dealt with this haunted house where the individuals who retired in it were stuck to the house, they couldn't necessarily leave the house. And then the second season was based on like a 1950s insane asylum, along with alien abduction. And then you have season 3, which dealt with as we're mentioning here, the Coven, which was this group of witches, and some witches that had been around since like the 1800s that happened to have jumped time and lived through all the way up to modern times. So again, each season is very different, even though the actors and actresses do jump seasons and play different roles. Great show though, definitely check it out. But this one goes on top of, again, if you've seen season 3 on Coven, which is based around this group of witches. They've as you can see here, they've had some characters jump in and out of other seasons, and they've actually had them play a predominant role in the American Horror Story Apocalypse, where they did fight the Antichrist. Now the question now is starting to come up is, well, do you have them continue to show up in other seasons? Because again, if this is all happening in the same universe, so to speak, then it would make sense that these characters would and could show up in other time periods, because again, they've been around this entire time. It's just a matter of, do they show up or not? I think the bigger question is, does it make sense for them to continue to show up or not? And if it doesn't make sense, don't force it. Let them pop up where they need to, where it does make sense, where it does add to the story. Otherwise, let the season play out on its own. Let that story be its own. Don't force characters from other seasons into something that doesn't feel organic for them to be there. So again, that's kind of what this article is touching on. Whether or not that makes sense, whether or not we should continue to see these witches popping up in other seasons. And here, this is from the Coven from the season. We have Jessica Lange. As you know, she was one of the main characters, witches that had jumped from over history. And I don't say jump as in kind of like when you think about Underworld, the film, where they have like one of the leaders awake and the other 3 are asleep until they switch places. When I say jump through time, meaning she's been around this Coven and running this thing since like the 1800s, and she has survived thus far that long. So that's what I mean by jumping. But again, if you haven't checked this show out, definitely give it a watch. They already started doing a spin-off called American Horror Stories. So this is American Horror Story. Then they've called one American Horror Stories. I think it's still pretty good. It's strong in its own right. But again, I think the OG show is still a phenomenal show. Again, if you're into this type of stuff, obviously if you are and you're watching this channel, you're into horror, this is definitely a show to check out. We don't have too many horror shows series out there, and this one that's been going on for 12 seasons. I mean, it's a testament that it's still going on for 12 seasons, and it has spawned its own spin-off TV series. So again, if you have Hulu and you haven't seen it, check it out. And if you have and you didn't think it was for you, I'd recommend go back and give it another look, or just go through the seasons and read what that season's about, and maybe give that season a try. And then you might find that you like that and give the other ones a chance. So next topic is something we touched on last night, which was, again, like 14 horror films based on true stories. Again, one of them was The Strangers. And again, I came across this article that got a little bit more in depth. And like I mentioned, I will provide links of every one of these articles in the description. So if you want to go back and read these through in more detail, you will have those links available to you. But ultimately, what this one goes through, one of the main stories or events and true life events or true stories that was used to influence this movie. Many of you probably have heard of Sharon Tate. I'd imagine you've heard of Sharon Tate and the Manson family, Charlie Manson. So that's one of the main influences for this story, was some of the Manson family members attacking and retiring Sharon Tate along with some other individuals. Obviously, they were eventually caught, imprisoned. Most of them have retired as well. I think there's only 1 or 2 of them that were involved in that night's incident, still alive, still in prison, still fighting every year to get paroled. I don't think it will ever happen, to be honest, just due to the brutality of those events that night. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just go out there, Google Sharon Tate, Manson family, and you'll have an abundance of information as far as what took place that night. But we won't get into too much of those details here, just because it's sensitive topic. Want to be sensitive to what those details are, and obviously, the YouTube algorithms don't want to get too much into those specifics. So while the Manson family was, and the Sharon Tate incident was predominantly influenced here. We do see that story playing out. Again, if you haven't seen the film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino, they also touched on this topic as well with Sharon Tate, but they flipped the script where instead of Sharon Tate being the one who was retired, it was actually the attackers who were retired. So Sharon Tate's played by Margot Robbie in that Tarantino film. So don't go watch. If you've seen that, don't think that that's actually, obviously we know Tarantino's films are really kind of exaggerated. But if you know the Sharon Tate story, you'll know that's not exactly what happened as far as her surviving that evening. So again, this goes on to even talk about some of the other true stories and events that inspired or influenced this film. So again, I'll put all this information in the description, but feel free to check it out. Again, it's just one of those tidbits of film history that we don't tend to hear about when a film comes out, and even when we do. We see films who will constantly put right at the very beginning of their trailer or right at the very beginning of a film, it will say based on a true story. Like we've all seen, I'm sure, the TV series Fargo that's been going on for a few, I think like 4 seasons now. And at the beginning of every episode, I think it says based on true events or based on a true story. When it's been debunked. All those seasons and episodes have been debunked that none of those are based on a true story or true events. And whatever influence was used is very thin influence. Unlike this here, and again, the list that we went through in last night's show, where we have clear linkage between the film, what's happening in the film, and what happened in real life. So big difference. So I think sometimes when they use those things, it's just try to draw people in to say, oh, this really happened, come see this show or come watch this movie. I think sometimes they should be held accountable whether or not it's actually true or not, but that's a whole nother discussion we can have for another day. And our last topic is, again, one of those lists I just like to kind of go through as a fan. Let's go back to the top, see if we agree, don't agree. Obviously, I've been through this list briefly just to kind of see what's out there. I for the vast majority, I agree with the list, but we'll run through it. And you tell me if you agree with the list, if you agree with whatever changes I'm going to call out. Great. If not, what are your top 10, top 5, and just drop a comment on the video, and we'll take a look at it. So. Again, this is just a summary up here. Zombie films, kind of when they started, when the first one was. Obviously, you see there George Romero's name being mentioned for Night of the Living Dead in 1968, which we all know to be an absolute classic film. If you have not seen the 1968 Night of the Living Dead, definitely check it out. The remake is okay, but nothing's going to top that original film. So, all right, so jumping into, we're going to run through these fairly quickly because, again, I want to just, be cognizant of everyone's time tonight, being a Saturday night, and again, we want to keep the show pretty short. So we're going to run through these fairly quick, and if we agree, we'll just say we agree, we'll move on. If not, we'll either move off the list or move up on the list is how I'm going to play this. So, all right, so coming at number 10, at least for this author, number 10, The Return of the Living Dead, 1985. Right now, I'll leave it where it's at for now. I think the 80s was just one of those times when we got an abundance of horror films, whether big budget, small budget, independent. It was just, we were getting a lot of it. And obviously, this being a zombie film, if you have never seen this before, it was your typical 80s look, feel type film. Felt very low budget. So while we don't have a lot of zombie films to be based on, I think this is still one of those core ones that you could say definitely belongs in the top 10 for the subgenre of zombies for horror films. So I'm okay leaving it at number 10 for now, but we'll see if we need to bump this one up, leave it where it's at. The only place it can go is up, since we're just going to stick to these 10. So all it can do is get better from here for this one. All right, and it does. So Dead Alive, 1992. So for me, it is what it is. For the time, for the early 90s, It was a good film, an okay film. Am I gonna pick this one over our Return of the Living Dead? Probably not. I think what I would do is I would swap these two, make Dead Alive number 10, and then we'll put Return of the Living Dead at number 9. Again, while I feel it does have its attributes, considering 1992, I love that. I'm an 80s person. I love the 80s, and I would definitely put the 85 film over this 92 film. All right, so jumping to number 8, Reanimator. So 1985 again. Like I said, the 80s was one of those times, right? So this one though, even though like I literally just said I love the 80s, I love all aspect of the 80s. This film though, I actually think so let's do this. I think I will leave Dead Alive at number 9, and I'm gonna swap Reanimator and Return of the Living Dead. Return of the Living Dead. Just want to make sure we got that right. Yeah, Return of the Living Dead. We're going to swap those two out. So Return of the Living Dead moves down to number 8, and Reanimator moves to number 10. I'm good with that. Reanimator I've seen a couple times. Again, for what it is, it's okay, but I'm not gonna put that one ahead of Return of the Living. No, not gonna happen. All right, so now we're gonna make another change now. Rec. I might get some heat on this one. I might get some heat in the comments for this one. Rec, though, for me, is not at number 7. I'm putting that at number 10, and everything else can bump up a spot. I've watched Rec. I've watched Rec 2. I did not care for either one of them, and it has nothing to do with the fact they're found footage films. I like found footage films. I watch each one of them for what they are. I don't judge one over the I don't judge one found footage film based on what another one, my experience is with another one. But this one, I just can't get behind it. I sat there and just literally thought to myself, why am I watching this? I do not like this, but I'm going to finish it because maybe something will happen that will change my mind. And it did not change my mind. And neither did part 2. So Rec moves down to number 10. Everything else can move up. I will bump even Reanimator up to number 9. I will put Reanimator over Rec any day of the week for myself. And again, I might get some heat for that. And I'm sure anyone will let me know in the comments if they agree with that. All right, so Train to Busan. I'm good with number 6. If you haven't seen this film, it's definitely worth a check out. I felt this one kind of flew under the radar for quite some time, and it's really not that old, as you can see. It's only about 6 years old, but I haven't come across too many people that have seen this, and if they've heard of it or they've heard it in passing but haven't taken the time to watch it, I definitely think it's one of those to check out. Give it a try. It's not going to be for everybody, but for a zombie film, very, very entertaining. And I am comfortable leaving it at number 6 and everything else behind it staying where it's at. So me and the author are online with this one. Day of the Dead. Okay, so we're going to swap this one out for the one we literally just talked about. Day of the Dead does not, again, while I enjoy these 80s films, again, another 85 film, this one I would not take over, again, Train to Busan. I switch them around. I'll put this one at least at number 6 and then bring the other one forward to my top 5. But again, it's one of your typical, again, the 80s were the 80s. Yeah, a lot of these movies coming out, and here's just another one. Again, our third film on this in this top 10 list. 3 of them thus far have been in 1985. So again, it was just one of those times. If you weren't around, then you wouldn't understand. But if you were, then you know what I'm talking about. So, all right, moving along. Let's see here. Number 4, 28 Days Later. I'm surprised this is even on here. I never was under the impression that this was a zombie film. I was always under the impression this was more of like a rage virus versus zombies, but I guess they are going to classify the rage virus as zombies, I guess. So if that's the direction we're going, depending upon what the next 3 are, I will potentially move this one up because I enjoy this film, my favorite films. I did not enjoy 28 Weeks Later. I am looking forward, though, to 28 Years Later with Cillian Murphy and Danny Boyle both returning. I understand while that is the third film of these original two, it's also the first film of a new trilogy that they're going to be doing down this path. So again, depending upon what these next top three are, this will either stay at number 4 or move up. But this one will not move back on my list. I enjoy this film quite a bit, and I do revisit this one quite often as well. So, but again, I wouldn't have classified originally what I've always understood to be a rage virus as zombies, but maybe we do now. So, all right. So moving to number 3. Okay, so as I just said, we are now moving 28 days later up, Shaun of the Dead down. I enjoy Shaun of the Dead. I think it's a great film for what it is. But to me, yes, it's zombie related, but it's more comedy than anything else. So this goes to number 4. 28 days later now comes up to number 3 at a minimum. So let's move on. Night of the Living Dead. Now, I talked about this one already at the beginning before we got into this list. If you haven't seen this already, check it out. Great film. Is it my number 2? No, it's not my number 2. I will put this as my number 3. Bring 28 days later up to number 2. Leave Shaun of the Dead at number 4. But this will definitely be in my top 3. This is one film, and I do like it because it's also, there's 2 versions out there actually you can find. There's the black and white version. They've actually done one where they've redone it in color. I think it's good to see both, but I prefer the black and white just because that's how it was intended for me to see it, and I enjoy that. But I also enjoy, for example, like the Twilight Zone, the original TV series, the black and white. I love that look. I just love seeing for how it was originally intended to be seen, how it was originally presented at the time. So same thing with this film. I prefer it in the black and white. So, all right, moving on to the number 1 spot, Dawn of the Dead, 1978. That's not moving. I've already mentioned that at the beginning, actually in our last topic when we were talking about the last film in George Romero's canon coming out. Staying at number 1 for me. I love this film. One of my favorite zombie films, probably my favorite zombie films thus far. So I'm 100% in agreement with the author on this one. Dawn of the Dead 1978 is number 1 for me as far as zombie films go. So yeah, so that's the list. So yeah, let me know if you agree with me, if you don't agree with me, or if you agree with the author. And like I said, drop a comment below and let us know what you think. What would be your top 5 or top 10, or would you rearrange this order in any different way? So. All right, everyone, that's gonna wrap it up for tonight. Like I said, it was just a pretty quick show. Nothing too crazy going on this Saturday evening, but I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your evening. And if you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe. It does help out the channel. We will be getting into, in the coming weeks, some live shows, watch parties, and doing some movie reviews. So our movie reviews, we will try to keep them as spoiler-free as possible, especially on newer releases. But again, if it has been a while, and when I say a while, I'm defining a while by like 3 weeks, a month, and the movie's been out, we'll probably do a spoiler review, about 10 to 15 minute spoiler review video. And we'll title it correctly, so that way you know when you click on it, you're going into it. There's going to be spoilers. So if you see something, or if you see a title that says spoiler on it and you haven't seen the film but you're wanting to see it, then obviously don't click on it, because otherwise we're gonna ruin it for you. So otherwise, again, thank you for joining me tonight. And if you haven't done so already, please check out our sister channel, Quiet on the Set. Give that channel a like, share, and subscribe as well. That's where we talk about everything else but horror. We talk about horror over there, but not in any great detail. This is the place where we will talk about horror in all the details around the TV shows, movies, comics, graphic novels. But that channel is more for everything else as far as in the industry, TVs and movies, things of that nature. But for horror, this is where we're going to stick to, is the Reign of Horror channel. So again, have a great evening. Thanks for joining me, and we will catch you at the next one. Peace.